I'm Jessica Thompson, and I'm about to tell you how my own sister's betrayal at the most crucial moment of my life actually became the key to saving my children. When she promised to testify about my ex-husband's anger issues and then vanished without a trace on the day that would determine my kids' future, I thought my world was ending. What I didn't know was that a sharp-eyed family court investigator named Elena Vasquez was taking detailed notes about everything, including my sister's suspicious absence. Sometimes the people who abandon you reveal more about your character than those who stand by you ever could. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 18 months ago, my marriage to Michael Rodriguez crumbled in the most devastating way possible. After 9 years together and 2 beautiful children, I discovered that Mike had been leading a double life that included not just another woman but a pattern of financial deception that left us drowning in debt I never knew existed. When I confronted him about the secret credit cards and the money missing from our joint savings account, his response wasn't remorse or explanation. Instead, Mike exploded into a rage so intense that our 6-year-old son Ryan hid in his bedroom closet, while 8-year-old Lily called my sister Bree, sobbing into the phone about how Daddy was scaring Mommy again. That night changed everything. As I stood in our kitchen with shattered dishes scattered across the floor and my children's terrified faces burned into my memory, I knew there was no going back. Mike had always had a temper, but I'd convinced myself it was just stress from work, just the pressure of providing for a family, just anything other than what it really was. The divorce that followed was brutal and complicated, made worse by Mike's determination to paint himself as the stable parent while portraying me as an unstable woman who couldn't handle the responsibilities of motherhood. Living in Riverside, California, where housing costs seemed to increase every month while my marketing coordinator's salary remained frustratingly stagnant, I found myself squeezed into a 2-bedroom apartment in the Willowbrook complex. It wasn't the spacious family home we'd lost in the divorce settlement, but it was safe, clean, and most importantly, it was ours. Lily and Ryan shared the smaller bedroom, their bunk beds positioned so they could whisper to each other before falling asleep, a ritual that seemed to comfort them during those first difficult months of our new life. My daily routine became a carefully orchestrated dance of efficiency and determination. Up at 5:30 to prepare lunches and lay out clothes, then wake the kids at 6:15 for breakfast before the 20-minute drive to Lincoln Elementary School. From there, I'd rush to Pacific Marketing Solutions, where I managed social media campaigns and coordinated promotional events for local businesses. The work was demanding but flexible enough that I could usually handle school pickup at 3:15, though some days required quick arrangements with my friend Sam Williams, whose daughter was in Lily's class. The custody arrangement that emerged from our divorce seemed reasonable on paper. Mike would have the children every other weekend, plus alternating holidays, while I maintained primary custody during the school week. For the first few months, this schedule worked well enough. Mike would pick up Lily and Ryan on Friday evenings and return them Sunday night, usually in good spirits and with stories about trips to the movies or the arcade. I began to hope that perhaps we could create a functional co-parenting relationship despite our personal history. My sister Bree had been my anchor throughout the entire divorce process. As a successful real estate agent with Sunset Realty Group, she understood the financial pressures I was facing and had even helped me find the apartment at Willowbrook, negotiating with the landlord to waive the security deposit when money was impossibly tight. Bree was everything I wasn't: Mayans, confident, outgoing, and seemingly immune to the kind of self-doubt that plagued me during those dark months. She had witnessed some of Mike's worst moments during our marriage, including the night he'd thrown a coffee mug against the wall when Lily accidentally spilled juice on his work papers. More importantly, Bree had been there the evening everything fell apart. She'd arrived at our house just as Mike was shouting about the credit card statements I'd found, his face red with anger as he accused me of being paranoid and controlling. She'd seen him grab my arm hard enough to leave bruises, heard him tell me that I was lucky he put up with my constant nagging, and watched our children cower in fear as their father's voice echoed through the house. In the weeks that followed, Bree repeatedly assured me that she would testify about what she'd witnessed if it ever became necessary. The trouble began 6 months ago when Mike filed a motion to modify our custody arrangement. According to his petition, I was an unfit mother who worked too many hours, relied too heavily on daycare and babysitters, and created an unstable environment for our children. He claimed that Lily had been coming to his house upset about missing school events because of my work schedule, and that Ryan had told him he wished he could live at Daddy's house all the time because it was bigger and had a swimming pool. Reading those accusations felt like being punched in the stomach. Every single claim was either completely false or a twisted version of reality designed to make me look negligent. Yes, I worked full-time, but so did most single mothers trying to support their families. Yes, I occasionally needed Sam to help with pickup when work ran late, but that happened maybe twice a month, not regularly as Mike suggested. The part about Lily missing school events was particularly infuriating because I'd attended every single parent-teacher conference, school play, and art show since our divorce, often rearranging my schedule or taking time off work to be present. Mike's petition requested a 50-50 custody split, which would mean the children would spend alternating weeks at each house. On the surface this might sound fair, but the reality was more complex. His new girlfriend Kayla had moved into the 3-bedroom house in Oakwood Heights that he'd somehow managed to afford despite claiming financial hardship during our divorce. The house featured a pool, a large backyard, and separate bedrooms for both children, creating an obvious contrast to our modest apartment. More troubling was Mike's history of using the children as messengers, asking them questions about my personal life and work schedule that put them in impossible positions. The court appointed Elena Vasquez, a seasoned family court investigator with 15 years of experience, to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of both households. Miss Vasquez was a petite woman with sharp eyes and an understated professional demeanor that somehow made you want to tell her the complete truth about everything. Her job was to interview both parents, visit our homes, speak with the children separately, and ultimately make a recommendation to the judge about what custody arrangement would serve Lily and Ryan's best interests. During my first interview with Ms. Vasquez at the Riverside,
preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
County Superior Court, I tried to present myself as a calm, rational mother who simply wanted what was best for her children. We discussed my work schedule, my relationship with the kids, and my concerns about Mike's temper and his tendency to put the children in the middle of adult conflicts. I mentioned that my sister had witnessed some of Mike's more volatile moments during our marriage and would be available to testify if needed. Ms. Vasquez took careful notes throughout our conversation, asking detailed questions about specific incidents and requesting documentation of my work schedule, the children's school records, and my financial situation. She seemed particularly interested when I described the night that had led to our separation, asking me to recount exactly what Bree had seen and heard. I provided her with Bree's contact information and mentioned that my sister had been present during several other concerning incidents over the years. The home visit that followed went better than I'd expected. Miss Vasquez arrived on a Tuesday evening when the children were doing homework at our small dining table. She observed our bedtime routine, noted the children's comfort level in the apartment, and asked them gentle questions about their daily life. Lily showed her the art corner I'd created in the living room, while Ryan demonstrated how he'd organized his collection of action figures on the shelf above his bed. Both children seemed relaxed and happy, chatting easily with the investigator about school, friends, and their favorite activities. In contrast, Mike's interview apparently didn't go as smoothly as he'd hoped. Through my attorney Amanda Chen, I learned that he'd become defensive when questioned about his financial situation and his new living arrangements. Miss Vasquez had also spoken with Kayla, who seemed nervous and unprepared for questions about her role in the children's lives and her understanding of co-parenting dynamics. Most significantly, when asked about his temper and any incidents of anger in front of the children, Mike had categorically denied any problems, claiming that I was fabricating stories to damage his reputation. As the evaluation process continued, I felt cautiously optimistic. The children were thriving in our current arrangement, their grades were excellent, and they seemed emotionally stable despite the upheaval of the past year and a half. Miss Vasquez had been thorough but fair in her assessment, and I believed the truth would ultimately prevail. The final step in the process would be a court hearing where both sides could present additional evidence and witnesses before the judge made a decision about our custody modification. Bree had promised multiple times that she would testify about what she'd witnessed during my marriage. We discussed her testimony in detail, going over the specific incidents she'd observed and the impact Mike's behavior had on the children. She seemed confident and prepared, assuring me that she remembered everything clearly and wasn't intimidated by the prospect of speaking in court. As the hearing date approached, I felt grateful to have such strong family support during what was undoubtedly the most stressful period of my life. The week before the hearing, I took time off work to prepare thoroughly with Amanda Chen. We reviewed all the documentation, practiced potential questions, and discussed the overall strategy for presenting my case. Amanda was confident that the evidence was strongly in my favor, particularly given Ms. Vasquez's apparent thoroughness in documenting the children's current stability and well-being. The investigator's report wasn't due until after the hearing, but her preliminary observations had seemed positive during our interactions. Everything seemed to be falling into place until the morning of the hearing itself. I'd arranged for Sam to take the day off work so she could watch Lily and Ryan, not wanting them to be present during what promised to be a difficult and potentially contentious proceeding. I'd laid out my most professional outfit the night before, a navy blue suit that projected competence and stability. My folder of documents was organized and ready, and I'd even managed to eat a light breakfast despite my nervousness. The call from Bree came at 7:30 in the morning, just as I was getting ready to leave for the courthouse. Her voice sounded strained and distant as she explained that something had come up at work, an important client who needed immediate attention, and she wouldn't be able to make it to the hearing. She promised it was just a scheduling conflict and that she could testify at a later date if necessary, but for today, she simply couldn't get away. Standing in my small bathroom with my phone pressed to my ear, I felt the floor drop out from under me. Bree's testimony wasn't just important, it was crucial to countering Mike's claims that I was exaggerating or fabricating stories about his behavior. Without her eyewitness account of his temper and the specific incidents she'd observed, my case became significantly weaker. I tried to convince her to reconsider, explaining how vital her presence was, but she insisted that this client emergency couldn't be postponed. The drive to the courthouse felt surreal, like I was moving through thick fog while everyone else continued with their normal routines. Amanda met me in the hallway outside the courtroom, immediately noticing my distressed state. When I explained about Bree's absence, her expression grew serious. While we could potentially request a continuance to allow Bree to testify at a later date, doing so would delay the entire process by several more months, and might give the impression that my case wasn't well prepared. As we entered the courtroom, I noticed Ms. Vasquez seated in the gallery, her familiar notebook open and pen ready. The sight of her provided a small measure of comfort. Throughout this entire process, she'd been fair, thorough, and genuinely focused on the children's best interests. Whatever happened today, I knew she would continue to advocate for what was truly best for Lily and Ryan. Mike sat at the opposite table with his attorney, looking confident and well-rested. Kayla was present in the gallery, dressed professionally, and carrying herself with the poise of someone who felt certain about the outcome. The contrast between their apparent confidence and my growing anxiety was stark, and I wondered if my nervousness was visible to everyone in the room. Judge Patricia Morrison called the hearing to order promptly at 9 o'clock. She was a veteran family court judge, known for her no-nonsense approach and her ability to see through attempts at manipulation or deception. After reviewing the basic facts of the case, she invited Mike's attorney to present their arguments for modifying the custody arrangement. The presentation that followed was more aggressive than I'd anticipated. Mike's lawyer painted a picture of an overworked, stressed single mother who was prioritizing her career over her children's needs. They presented evidence of my work schedule, emphasizing the times I'd needed backup childcare and suggesting that this demonstrated instability. They highlighted the differences between our living situations, implying that the children would be better served by spending equal time in Mike's larger home with its additional amenities. Most damaging were the statements attributed to the children themselves. According to Mike's testimony, both Lily and Ryan had expressed preference for spending more time at his house, citing the pool, their individual bedrooms, and what they perceived as a more relaxed atmosphere. He claimed that Lily had told him she felt responsible for taking care of me because I seemed sad and tired all the time, an assertion that made my heart ache with the possibility that my children had been worrying about my emotional state. When it came time for Amanda to present my case, the absence of Bree's testimony created an obvious gap in our strategy. While we had documentation of the children's academic success, their involvement in extracurricular activities, and their apparent emotional stability, we lacked the crucial eyewitness testimony about Mike's problematic behavior during our marriage. Amanda did her best to present my perspective on the incidents in question, but hearsay wasn't nearly as powerful as direct testimony would have been. I testified about my commitment to the children, the stability of our current routine, and my concerns about Mike's tendency to interrogate them about my personal life. I described the improvement in their behavior and emotional state since we'd established our current living arrangement, and I emphasized my flexibility in accommodating their relationship with their father. However, without Bree's corroboration, my accounts of Mike's past behavior seemed like the complaints of a bitter ex-wife, rather than documented facts. Throughout the proceedings, I noticed Ms. Vasquez taking extensive notes, her expression unreadable, but her attention clearly focused on every detail of the testimony. She observed the interaction between Mike and his attorney, watched his facial expressions during my testimony, and seemed particularly attentive when the conversation turned to the children's emotional well-being and their expressed preferences about living arrangements. The most difficult moment came when Mike took the stand to present his version of events. He categorically denied any history of anger problems or inappropriate behavior in front of the children. According to his testimony, our marriage had ended due to incompatible goals and my inability to handle the normal stresses of family life. He portrayed himself as a patient, involved father who had always prioritized his children's needs above his own. When Amanda cross-examined Mike about specific incidents, including the night Bree had witnessed his violent outburst, he claimed I was either misremembering or deliberately mischaracterizing normal marital disagreements. Without Bree present to contradict his version of events, his denials carried significant weight. He presented himself as a calm, reasonable man who simply wanted more time with his children and the opportunity to provide them with enhanced stability and opportunities. The hearing concluded with both attorneys making final arguments about why their client's proposed custody arrangement would best serve the children's interests. Mike's lawyer emphasized the benefits of the Oakwood Heights house, Kayla's positive influence as a potential stepmother figure, and Mike's financial stability compared to my more modest circumstances. Amanda countered with arguments about the importance of maintaining the children's current stability, their strong academic performance, and the potential disruption of dramatically altering their living arrangements. Judge Morrison announced that she would review all the evidence, including Ms. Vasquez's forthcoming report, before making a decision. The entire process could take several weeks, during which our current custody arrangement would remain in effect. As court adjourned, I felt defeated and uncertain about the outcome. The absence of Bree's testimony had created a significant weakness in my case, and Mike's confident presentation had been more effective than I'd feared. Walking out of the courthouse with Amanda, I tried to process what had just happened. The sister who had promised to stand by me, who had witnessed the very incidents that proved Mike's unsuitability as a primary parent, had abandoned me at the most crucial moment. Her last-minute excuse about a work emergency felt hollow and inadequate given the stakes involved. I couldn't help wondering if there were other factors at play, perhaps pressure from family members who thought I should be more accommodating to Mike's requests, or her own discomfort with the idea of testifying in court. The drive home was a blur of disappointment and anxiety about the future. How would I explain to Lily and Ryan if the judge decided they needed to split their time equally between two homes? How would I manage the logistics of alternating weeks, especially given my work schedule and their school activities? Most troubling was the possibility that Mike's portrayal of me as an unstable, overwhelmed single mother might actually influence the judge's decision, despite the lack of real evidence supporting his claims. That evening, as I helped the children with homework and prepared dinner in our small but comfortable kitchen, I tried to maintain a normal routine, while my mind raced with worry about the hearing's outcome. Lily seemed to sense my stress, offering to help with extra chores and asking fewer questions than usual about my day. Ryan, always more direct in his approach, asked if something bad had happened at work since I seemed unusually quiet. I realized that regardless of what happened with the custody decision, the experience had taught me important lessons about who I could truly depend on during life's most challenging moments. My sister's absence had been more than just an inconvenience. It was a betrayal that revealed the limits of family loyalty when real sacrifice was required. At the same time, the support I'd received from friends like Sam, professionals like Amanda, and Ms. Vasquez, and even colleagues who had covered for me during court dates, demonstrated that reliable support often came from unexpected sources. As I tucked Lily and Ryan into their bunk beds that night, listening to their quiet conversation about school friends and weekend plans, I was reminded of why this battle was so important. These children deserved stability, safety, and the knowledge that their mother would fight for their best interests regardless of the personal cost. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever decision the judge ultimately made, I was determined to continue advocating for their well-being with every resource at my disposal. The weeks that followed would test that resolve in ways I couldn't yet imagine, but that night, surrounded by the familiar comfort of our small apartment and the peaceful breathing of my sleeping children, I found the strength to face whatever came next. Sometimes the people who disappoint us reveal more about our own resilience than their presence ever could, and I was beginning to understand that this fight was far from over. The immediate aftermath of the custody hearing left me feeling hollow and disconnected from the world around me. Sam Williams had taken the day off from her job at the local credit union to watch Lily and Ryan, and when I arrived at her house that afternoon, the children were playing in her backyard while she prepared an early dinner. The normalcy of the scene felt surreal after the morning's legal drama, and I struggled to transition from the formal courthouse environment back to the everyday concerns of motherhood. Sam took one look at my face and knew the hearing hadn't gone well. She guided me to her kitchen table while calling the children inside, her movements efficient and caring, in the way that only comes from deep friendship. Over the past 18 months since my divorce, Sam had become more than just a fellow parent from school pickup. She'd evolved into my closest confidant and most reliable support system. Her own divorce 3 years earlier had given her insight into the emotional complexities of single parenthood, and she never offered empty platitudes or simple solutions to complicated problems. As Lily and Ryan settled into their afternoon routine of homework and snacks, Sam listened while I recounted the morning's events. The betrayal by Bree stung more deeply than I'd initially realized, not just because of its impact on the legal proceedings, but because it shattered my understanding of our relationship. Growing up, Bree and I had been inseparable despite our 3-year age difference. She'd been my maid of honor, the first person I'd called when each of my children was born, and the one family member who'd consistently supported me through the darkest days of my marriage's collapse. Sam's perspective on family dynamics was refreshingly honest and uncomplicated by the emotional baggage that often clouds our judgment about relatives. She pointed out that Bree's absence might have been more revealing than her presence would have been, particularly to someone as experienced as Miss Vasquez, a family court investigator who'd spent 15 years evaluating custody cases, would certainly notice when a key witness failed to appear, especially one who'd been specifically mentioned during interviews as having relevant observations about the family situation. The financial implications of potentially losing primary custody weighed heavily on my mind as we discussed the possible outcomes. Child support calculations in California were based on both parents' incomes and the percentage of time each parent had physical custody. If Mike succeeded in obtaining 50-50 custody, my child support obligations could increase significantly while my actual time with the children decreased. The mathematics of single parenthood were unforgiving, and every modification to our arrangement had cascading effects on my ability to maintain our current standard of living. My job at Pacific Marketing Solutions provided decent benefits and regular hours, but the salary of $48,000 annually stretched thin in Riverside's expensive housing market. The Willowbrook apartment cost $1,800 per month, a sum that consumed more than 40% of my take-home pay, even before considering utilities, groceries, and the countless expenses associated with raising 2 children. Mike's request for increased custody time seemed motivated less by genuine desire for additional parenting responsibilities, and more by financial considerations disguised as concern for the children's welfare. That evening, as I helped Lily with her 3rd-grade reading comprehension homework and listened to Ryan practice his multiplication tables, I was struck by how well-adjusted and happy my children seemed despite the upheaval of the past year and a half. Their teachers consistently reported excellent academic performance and positive social interactions with classmates. Both children participated in extracurricular activities that they enjoyed and that fit within our modest budget. Lily had joined the school's art club, where her natural creativity flourished, under the guidance of a patient teacher who recognized her talent. Ryan played in the local soccer league, his boundless energy finding a perfect outlet in twice-weekly practices and Saturday morning games. The routine we'd established in our small apartment felt comfortable and sustainable. Mornings began with the children helping to prepare their own lunches, a responsibility they'd embraced with surprising enthusiasm. Evenings included homework time at the dining table, where I could assist with questions while preparing dinner. Bedtime involved reading together, a ritual that had continued since they were toddlers, and that now included more sophisticated chapter books that captured their imagination and improved their reading skills. Our weekend activities revolved around free or low-cost family outings that the children genuinely enjoyed. The Riverside Community Park offered playgrounds, walking trails, and open spaces where Ryan could practice soccer skills while Lily sketched the ducks that congregated around the small pond. The public library hosted Saturday morning story times and craft activities that both children loved, and the librarians had become familiar with our regular visits. These simple pleasures created positive memories and strengthened our family bond without straining our budget. The contrast between our modest lifestyle and Mike's more affluent circumstances was undeniable, but I'd worked hard to help the children understand that happiness and security weren't measured solely by material possessions. Our apartment might lack a swimming pool and individual bedrooms, but it provided safety, stability, and an environment where each child felt valued and heard. The bunk beds in their shared room had become a source of bonding. rather than conflict, with Lily reading bedtime stories to Ryan and both children creating elaborate games that utilize the limited space creatively. Mike's house in the Oakwood Heights subdivision represented everything I'd lost in the divorce settlement. The three-bedroom home featured an open floor plan, updated kitchen, and landscaped backyard with the pool that had become a central point in his custody arguments. Kayla's presence added another layer of complexity to the children's experience there, as they navigated the dynamics of a household that included their father's girlfriend and her expectations about family life. From conversations with Lily and Ryan after their weekend visits, I'd gathered that life at Mike's house operated on different principles than our apartment routine. Rules seemed more flexible, bedtimes were later, and screen time was unlimited in ways that sometimes made readjustment to our structured weekday schedule challenging. The children never complained directly about these differences, but I noticed patterns in their behavior and mood that suggested the contrasting environments created some confusion about expectations and boundaries. Kayla's relationship with the children appeared cordial but distant, lacking the deep emotional connection that develops naturally between parents and children over years of daily interaction. She seemed well-intentioned but inexperienced with the complexities of blended family dynamics. According to the children's casual mentions, she often deferred to Mike's decisions about discipline and daily routines, positioning herself more as a friendly adult presence than as an authority figure. The weeks following the custody hearing passed slowly as we waited for Judge Morrison's decision. Ms. Vasquez continued her investigation, conducting follow-up interviews and observations that would inform her final report to the court. I tried to maintain our normal routine while managing the underlying anxiety about potential changes to our living arrangements. Work provided a welcome distraction, as the demands of managing social media campaigns and coordinating promotional events required focus and creativity that temporarily pushed custody concerns to the background. My colleagues at Pacific Marketing Solutions had been supportive throughout the divorce and custody process, offering flexibility when court dates conflicted with work responsibilities and understanding when personal stress affected my usual efficiency. The company culture emphasized work-life balance, and my supervisor had consistently demonstrated that family obligations took priority over non-essential business demands. This support network felt especially valuable, given the isolation I sometimes experienced as a single parent navigating complex legal and financial challenges. Bree's continued absence from my life became more noticeable as days passed without communication. In the past, we'd spoken several times per week, sharing updates about work, family, and personal concerns. Her silence since the missed court appearance felt deliberate and uncomfortable, suggesting either guilt about her absence or a decision to distance herself from the complications of my custody battle. Several times I considered calling to discuss what had happened, but pride and hurt feelings prevented me from reaching out to someone who'd abandoned me during such a critical moment. The children occasionally asked about their aunt, wondering why she hadn't visited recently, or called to check on their activities. Bree had been a regular presence in their lives, bringing small gifts and taking genuine interest in their school projects and achievements. Her sudden disappearance required careful explanation that wouldn't burden them with adult conflicts or damage their perception of family relationships. I settled on vague references to work pressures and busy schedules, hoping to preserve their positive memories while protecting them from the disappointment I felt. During this waiting period, I found myself analyzing every interaction with Mike for signs of how he viewed the custody proceedings. His demeanor during child exchanges remained polite but distant, offering minimal conversation beyond logistics about pickup times and schedule changes. He seemed confident about the hearing's outcome, carrying himself with an assurance that suggested he believed his arguments had been persuasive. This confidence unsettled me, particularly given his attorney's aggressive presentation and the absence of Bree's crucial testimony. The children's reports about conversations at their father's house included references to potential changes in their living arrangements. Mike had apparently discussed the possibility of spending equal time in both homes, framing the potential modification as an opportunity for more family activities and expanded experiences. While he hadn't directly criticized our current arrangement, his presentation of the alternative clearly emphasized the advantages of his larger house and more flexible financial situation. 3 weeks after the hearing, Amanda Chen called with an update about the timeline for Judge Morrison's decision. The court's calendar was heavily backlogged, and we could expect to wait at least another month before receiving the final ruling. This extended uncertainty felt almost worse than a negative decision would have, as it prolonged the anxiety and prevented any sense of closure or planning for the future. The legal process moved at its own pace, indifferent to the emotional toll on families caught in its machinery. During this extended waiting period, I focused on documenting our daily routine and the children's continued stability in our current arrangement. I kept detailed records of their academic performance, including positive comments from teachers about their classroom behavior and social interactions. I photographed their art projects and homework assignments, creating a visual record of their engagement with school activities. I maintained a calendar of our family outings and activities, demonstrating the quality time we spent together despite our modest budget. These documentation efforts felt both necessary and heartbreaking, as they reduced the intimacy of family life to evidence for legal consumption. Every loving moment, every successful completion of a challenging homework assignment, every spontaneous laugh during our weekend adventures became potential proof of my fitness as a parent. The adversarial nature of the custody system transformed natural parenting activities into strategic demonstrations of competence and commitment. Ms. Vasquez scheduled additional home visits during this period, arriving unannounced to observe our family dynamics in truly natural settings. These surprise visits initially increased my anxiety, as I worried about the impression created by our modest apartment, or the children's occasional squabbles over toys or television choices. However, I gradually realized that these authentic moments provided better evidence of our family's functionality than any carefully staged presentation could achieve. During one such visit, Ms. Vasquez arrived just as I was helping Ryan with a particularly challenging math worksheet while Lily practiced clarinet in the living room. The small apartment meant that homework assistance and music practice occurred simultaneously, creating a controlled chaos that somehow worked for our family. Rather than seeming concerned about the noise level or lack of separate study spaces, Ms. Vasquez appeared impressed by how naturally the children accommodated each other's activities and how effectively I managed multiple parenting tasks in limited space. Another unscheduled observation occurred on a Saturday morning when we were preparing for Ryan's soccer game. Ms. Vasquez witnessed the efficient teamwork involved in gathering equipment, preparing snacks, and coordinating carpools with other parents. She observed Lily's enthusiastic support for her brother's athletic activities and Ryan's patience when we needed to make a quick stop at the grocery store before heading to the soccer field. These ordinary family moments demonstrated the genuine affection and cooperation that characterized our household better than any formal interview could achieve. The financial stress of potential custody changes continued to weigh on my mind as I calculated various scenarios for child support modifications. I researched California's family law guidelines, trying to understand how different custody arrangements would affect my obligations and Mike's responsibilities. The mathematics were complex and depended on numerous factors, including both parents' incomes, healthcare costs, and the specific percentage of time each parent provided care. If Mike succeeded in obtaining equal custody, the financial impact on our household could be devastating. Reduced child support income combined with increased expenses for maintaining duplicate sets of clothing, school supplies, and personal items in two homes would strain our already tight budget. I might need to consider a second job or request additional hours at Pacific Marketing Solutions, changes that could ironically support Mike's arguments about my work schedule interfering with effective parenting. The emotional preparation for potentially disappointing news became as important as the financial planning. I spoke with a counselor at the children's school about strategies for helping them adjust to major changes in their living arrangements. The school psychologist emphasized the importance of maintaining consistent communication and avoiding criticism of their father, regardless of my personal feelings about the custody decision. Children's emotional well-being depended on their ability to love both parents without feeling caught in the middle of adult conflicts. As October progressed and the weather began to cool, our family settled into autumn routines that highlighted the stability and contentment of our current arrangement. Lily's art projects reflected seasonal themes, with elaborate drawings of falling leaves and Halloween decorations that covered our refrigerator and brightened our small kitchen. Ryan's soccer season reached its peak with tournament games that brought our small community of parents together in enthusiastic support of their children's efforts. These normal family experiences felt precious and potentially fragile given the uncertainty about our future. I found myself savoring bedtime conversations with the children, weekend adventures to new parks or museums, and quiet evening moments when homework was complete and we could simply enjoy each other's company. The possibility that these routines might change dramatically in the near future made me more conscious of their value and more determined to protect the stability they represented. The gradual approach of Halloween provided opportunities for creativity and family bonding that exemplified the positive aspects of our current lifestyle. Both children had clear ideas about their costume preferences, and we spent several weekends crafting elaborate outfits using materials from discount stores and our own imagination. Lily decided to become a famous artist, complete with a painted smock and a beret that she wore with dramatic flair. Ryan chose to dress as a soccer player for his favorite professional team, requiring careful coordination of jersey colors and equipment details. Our apartment building's Halloween celebration brought together families from throughout the complex, creating a sense of community that had developed gradually over our months of residence. The children had formed friendships with neighbors their age, and I'd connected with other single parents who faced similar challenges in balancing work responsibilities with active parenting. These relationships provided informal support networks that enriched our lives in ways that couldn't be measured financially or legally. The approaching holiday season also meant potential complications in our custody schedule, as Mike had requested alternating years for major holidays as part of his modification petition. This year, according to our current agreement, the children would spend Christmas Eve with him and Christmas Day with me, an arrangement that had worked well the previous year. However, if his petition succeeded, future holiday schedules might become more complex and potentially disruptive to family traditions we'd been establishing. During this period of waiting and uncertainty, I gained a deeper appreciation for the friends and colleagues who had supported our family through difficult transitions. Sam Williams continued to provide reliable backup childcare and emotional support, never making me feel like a burden despite the frequency of my requests for assistance. My coworkers at Pacific Marketing Solutions remained flexible about schedule adjustments and understanding about the stress of ongoing legal proceedings. The contrast between this genuine support from friends and the abandonment by my sister became more stark as time passed. People who had no obligation to help our family consistently demonstrated loyalty and care, while someone who shared my history and claimed to love my children had disappeared at the moment when her support was most needed. This realization was painful but also clarifying, helping me understand that reliable relationships were built on consistent actions rather than blood relations or stated intentions. As November approached and the leaves in Riverside's parks turned brilliant shades of orange and gold, I felt increasingly confident about our family's resilience regardless of the court's decision. The children continued to thrive academically and socially, demonstrating emotional stability that reflected the security of our home environment. Our modest apartment had become a true sanctuary, where each family member felt valued and supported. The routines we'd established created predictability and comfort that would serve as anchor points during any future transitions. The documentation I'd maintained throughout this period painted a clear picture of a functional family unit operating effectively within its means and circumstances. School reports consistently praised both children's behavior and academic progress. Photographs captured genuine moments of joy and connection during family activities. Calendar records demonstrated consistent attendance at school events, medical appointments, and extracurricular activities. This evidence represented not just legal preparation but also a celebration of the life we'd built together against considerable odds. Most importantly, the time spent waiting for the court's decision had reinforced my confidence in my parenting abilities and my commitment to advocating for my children's best interests. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever adjustments might be required to our current arrangements, I knew that Lily and Ryan were surrounded by love, support, and the unwavering dedication of a mother who would continue fighting for their welfare regardless of legal outcomes or family disappointments. The call from Amanda Chen came on a rainy Thursday morning in late November, just as I was dropping the children off at Lincoln Elementary. Her voice carried an urgency that immediately set my nerves on edge, and she asked if I could meet her at her office within the hour to discuss some developments in the case. The tone suggested news that couldn't wait for our regularly scheduled appointment, and I felt my stomach drop as I imagined various scenarios that might require such immediate attention. Amanda's law office occupied the second floor of a renovated Victorian house in downtown Riverside, and I'd grown familiar with the narrow staircase and creaky wooden floors during our months of collaboration. Her paralegal, Maria, greeted me with a sympathetic smile that seemed to confirm my fears about receiving difficult news. The walk down the hallway to Amanda's office felt longer than usual, each step echoing my growing anxiety about what awaited me behind her partially closed door. Amanda was seated behind her desk with several manila folders spread open before her, along with what appeared to be official court documents bearing Judge Morrison's letterhead. Her expression was serious but not defeated, suggesting that whatever news she had to share was complex rather than simply negative. She gestured for me to take the chair opposite her desk, the same seat where I'd received updates throughout the custody evaluation process. The judge's preliminary ruling had been filed the previous afternoon, Amanda explained, and while the final order wouldn't be entered for another week, the essential decision had been made. Judge Morrison had denied Mike's petition for 50-50 custody, maintaining our current arrangement with only minor modifications to the holiday schedule. The relief that flooded through me was so intense that I felt momentarily dizzy, as months of accumulated stress began to release their grip on my nervous system. However, Amanda's expression remained serious as she continued explaining the judge's reasoning. While the custody arrangement would remain unchanged, Judge Morrison had been clearly influenced by Ms. Vasquez's investigative report, which contained observations and conclusions that went far beyond what either side had anticipated. The family court investigator had documented patterns of behavior and communication that painted a detailed picture of both households and their respective impacts on the children's well-being. Ms. Vasquez's report, which Amanda had received that morning, was unusually comprehensive and included specific incidents that demonstrated her thorough understanding of our family dynamics. Most significantly, the investigator had documented Mike's tendency to interrogate the children about my personal life and work schedule, a pattern that she identified as inappropriate and potentially harmful to their emotional development. Her observations during home visits had revealed subtle signs of stress in the children when they discussed their father's household despite their obvious affection for him. The report also contained detailed analysis of Bree's absence from the custody hearing, which Ms. Vasquez had investigated independently after noting the discrepancy between my initial interviews and the actual court proceedings. Through contacts in the real estate industry, she had verified that Bree's claimed work emergency was fabricated, as no urgent client situations had been recorded at Sunset Realty Group on the day in question. This discovery had prompted Ms. Vasquez to examine more closely the family dynamics surrounding my support system and the pressures that might have influenced my sister's decision to avoid testifying. What emerged from this investigation was a pattern of manipulation that extended beyond Mike's direct actions to include pressure on family members who might provide unfavorable testimony. Ms. Vasquez had documented phone calls between Mike and various extended family members, including conversations with my parents where he had suggested that my custody case was vindictive and unnecessary. She had also uncovered evidence of financial pressure applied to Bree through her boyfriend Tyler, whose personal training business had recently received a significant loan from Mike's construction company. The revelation that Mike had essentially purchased my sister's silence through financial leverage over her boyfriend felt like a betrayal within a betrayal. Bree hadn't simply chosen work obligations over family loyalty, she had been compromised through a relationship that made her economically vulnerable to Mike's influence. The complexity of the manipulation demonstrated a level of calculation and planning that shocked me with its thoroughness and coldness. Ms. Vasquez's report detailed how this pattern of behavior reflected poorly on Mike's character and his approach to co-parenting. Rather than focusing on the children's best interests, he had devoted significant energy to undermining my support system and manipulating the legal process through indirect pressure on potential witnesses. The investigator noted that such behavior suggested a tendency toward control and manipulation that could negatively impact the children's emotional development and their relationship with both parents. The financial connections between Mike's business and Tyler's personal training venture had been carefully documented through public records and business filings that Ms. Vasquez had researched as part of her comprehensive investigation. The loan arrangement included terms that gave Mike significant influence over Tyler's business decisions and financial stability, creating a conflict of interest that compromised Bree's ability to testify honestly about what she had witnessed during my marriage. Judge Morrison's ruling referenced these findings extensively, noting that Mike's attempts to manipulate the legal process through financial pressure on witnesses demonstrated poor judgment and questionable ethics. The judge expressed particular concern about the impact such behavior might have on the children if they became aware of their father's manipulation of extended family relationships. The ruling emphasized that effective co-parenting required honest communication and respect for each parent's support system, qualities that Mike had failed to demonstrate. Amanda explained that the judge's decision also included specific provisions designed to prevent future manipulation and ensure that both parents could maintain appropriate support networks without interference. Mike was prohibited from having any business or financial relationships with members of my extended family, and any future modifications to the custody arrangement would be subject to additional scrutiny regarding potential witness intimidation or financial pressure. The ruling addressed Mike's claims about my work schedule and living arrangements with clear dismissal, noting that Ms. Vasquez had found no evidence of instability or neglect in our household. Instead, the investigator had documented a warm, nurturing environment where the children received consistent attention and support. The report specifically praised the children's academic performance, their emotional stability, and their obvious comfort in our modest apartment. Ms. Vasquez had also investigated the contrast between our living situations, concluding that while Mike's house offered more space and amenities, these material advantages didn't necessarily translate to better parenting or improved outcomes for the children. Her observations during visits to both households had revealed that the children's behavior was more relaxed and natural in our apartment, suggesting a level of comfort and security that couldn't be achieved through material possessions alone. The investigator's analysis of the children's statements about their preferences had been particularly insightful. Rather than taking their comments about enjoying Mike's pool and individual bedrooms at face value, Ms. Vasquez had probed deeper to understand the context and motivation behind these statements. She discovered that the children had been coached to emphasize certain aspects of their father's house and to downplay their attachment to our current living arrangements. This coaching had been subtle but consistent, involving repeated questions from Mike about what they liked best about each house and suggestions that they might be happier with more space and recreational opportunities. Ms. Vasquez noted that such manipulation of children's stated preferences was inappropriate and potentially harmful, as it forced them to choose between parents rather than allowing them to appreciate different aspects of each household. The report documented specific instances where Mike had used the children as sources of information about my personal life, work schedule, and financial situation. During her interviews, Ms. Vasquez had discovered that both Lily and Ryan had been asked detailed questions about my dating life, my work hours, and my stress levels. This interrogation had created anxiety in the children, who felt responsible for providing information they didn't understand was being used against me in legal proceedings. Ms. Vasquez had also investigated Kayla's role in the household and her relationship with the children. While she found no evidence of inappropriate behavior or neglect, the investigator noted that Kayla seemed unprepared for the complexities of step-parenting and lacked understanding of child development principles. Her tendency to defer to Mike's decisions without question had created a household dynamic where the children received inconsistent messaging about rules and expectations. The financial aspects of Mike's household had also come under scrutiny, as Ms. Vasquez investigated his claims about providing enhanced stability and opportunities for the children. She discovered that his apparent affluence was partially supported by significant debt and risky business investments that could potentially affect his long-term ability to maintain his current lifestyle. The investigator noted that true stability required sustainable financial practices rather than impressive material displays. Judge Morrison's ruling specifically addressed the issue of the children's individual bedrooms at Mike's house, noting that while private space was beneficial, the quality of family relationships and emotional support were more important factors in determining children's well-being. The judge observed that Lily and Ryan's shared bedroom in our apartment had actually strengthened their sibling bond and taught them valuable lessons about cooperation and consideration for others. The holiday schedule modifications included in the ruling were minor adjustments designed to provide more predictability and reduce potential conflicts between households. Rather than alternating major holidays annually, the schedule would remain consistent from year to year, allowing both children and parents to develop traditions and expectations around specific celebrations. This change reflected Judge Morrison's understanding that stability and routine were more valuable than mathematical equality and time allocation. Amanda explained that Mike's attorney would likely appeal certain aspects of the ruling, particularly the findings about witness manipulation and financial impropriety. However, the evidence documented by Ms. Vasquez was substantial and well-researched, making a successful appeal unlikely. The judge's decision was based on comprehensive investigation rather than partisan arguments, giving it a strong foundation that would be difficult to challenge effectively. The financial implications of the custody decision were immediately positive for our household, as the maintained arrangement meant no changes to child support calculations or obligations.
This stability would allow me to continue saving for potential homeownership while maintaining our current standard of living. The stress of potential financial catastrophe that had haunted me throughout the legal process was finally lifting, replaced by cautious optimism about our family's future prospects. More importantly, the ruling validated my instincts about what was best for Lily and Ryan's emotional and developmental needs. The judge's recognition of our apartment as a loving, stable environment confirmed that effective parenting wasn't dependent on material wealth or impressive
Accommodations. The children's happiness and security in our modest home had been officially acknowledged and protected through the legal system. The revelation about Bree's manipulation through financial pressure explained her sudden absence and provided context for what had felt like inexplicable betrayal. While the knowledge didn't excuse her failure to support us when we most needed her, it offered understanding of the complex pressures that had influenced her decision. The situation demonstrated how Mike's controlling behavior extended beyond our immediate family to encompass anyone who might threaten his legal strategy. Amanda advised me to maintain detailed documentation of any future attempts by Mike to manipulate family relationships or pressure potential witnesses. The judge's ruling had established clear boundaries around appropriate behavior, but enforcement would require vigilance and prompt reporting of any violations. The legal system had provided protection, but ongoing awareness would be necessary to ensure that protection remained effective. The timing of the decision just before the Thanksgiving holiday felt particularly meaningful as I considered how much our family had to be grateful for despite the challenges we'd faced. The children's stability had been preserved, our financial security maintained, and the truth about Mike's manipulative behavior officially recognized. Most importantly, the legal system had functioned as intended, protecting children's interests over adult ambitions and recognizing authentic family bonds over material advantages. The drive home from Amanda's office felt dramatically different from the anxious journey I'd made that morning. The gray November sky that had seemed ominous now appeared merely seasonal, and the familiar streets of Riverside looked welcoming rather than threatening. The weight of uncertainty that had pressed down on me for months was finally lifting, replaced by a sense of vindication and hope for the future. I decided to pick up the children early from their after-school program, wanting to share this moment of triumph with them even though they couldn't fully understand the legal complexities involved. Their excitement at the unexpected early pickup was infectious, and their chatter about classroom activities and playground adventures provided a perfect soundtrack for our drive home through the neighborhood that would continue to be our home. That evening, as we prepared dinner together in our small kitchen and the children completed homework at the dining table, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the ordinary moments that might have been disrupted by a different custody decision. The simple routines that had sustained us through difficult months were now protected and validated, free to continue developing into the traditions and memories that would shape my children's understanding of family and home. The phone rang several times that evening with calls from extended family members who had heard about the custody decision through various channels. My parents, who had remained carefully neutral throughout the legal proceedings, expressed relief that the situation had been resolved without requiring them to choose sides or testify in court. Their support had been limited but consistent, and I appreciated their respect for the legal process even when it created uncomfortable family dynamics. Sam Williams arrived with a bottle of sparkling cider and homemade cookies to celebrate the news, her genuine happiness for our family demonstrating the kind of friendship that had sustained us through the most challenging period of our lives. Her presence in our living room, listening to the children's excited recounting of their school day, while sharing in our relief about the custody decision, exemplified the authentic relationships that had emerged from our community involvement. The evening concluded with our regular bedtime routine, but the children seemed to sense that something significant had shifted in our household's emotional atmosphere. Their questions about whether we would continue living in our apartment received enthusiastic affirmation, and their expressions of contentment about our current arrangement felt more relaxed and confident than they had in months. As I tucked Lily and Ryan into their bunk beds that night, listening to their quiet conversation about weekend plans and upcoming school events, I realized that the legal victory was less important than the validation it provided for choices we had already made. Our family had found its rhythm and strength not through external validation but through daily commitment to each other's well-being and happiness. The challenges that lay ahead would be different, but no less significant than those we had already overcome. Building on the foundation of stability that the custody decision had preserved, we could now focus on growth and opportunity rather than simply defending what we had already achieved. The future stretched ahead with possibilities that had seemed impossible during the darkest days of legal uncertainty and family betrayal. The weeks following Judge Morrison's ruling brought unexpected complications that tested my newfound confidence in ways I hadn't anticipated. Mike's reaction to the custody decision was swift and calculated, revealing layers of vindictive behavior that Ms. Vasquez's investigation had only begun to uncover. Rather than accepting the court's judgment gracefully, he embarked on a campaign of subtle harassment designed to make our daily lives as difficult as possible while staying within the technical boundaries of the legal order. The first indication of this new strategy came during the next scheduled child exchange, when Mike arrived 30 minutes late to pick up Lily and Ryan for their weekend visit. His explanation was casual and unapologetic, citing unexpected work delays that would become a recurring theme in his behavior. The children waited by the window with their overnight bags, their excitement gradually fading into confusion and disappointment as the minutes stretched beyond their father's promised arrival time. When Mike finally appeared, his demeanor was cordial but cold, offering no acknowledgement of the inconvenience his tardiness had caused. He greeted the children with appropriate enthusiasm while completely ignoring my presence, creating an awkward dynamic that left Lily and Ryan uncertain about how to navigate the tension they could sense but not understand. This pattern of deliberate disrespect would continue for weeks, each incident carefully calculated to disrupt our routine while providing him with plausible explanations for his behavior. The systematic nature of these disruptions became clear as they escalated in frequency and creativity. Mike began requesting last-minute schedule changes that conflicted with the children's established activities and commitments. He would call on Thursday evenings to announce that he needed to pick up the children earlier on Friday due to special plans, forcing me to rearrange work schedules and disappoint the children when conflicts arose with their soccer practice or art club meetings. More troubling were the subtle attempts to undermine my authority and damage my relationship with Lily and Ryan through strategic gift-giving and promise-making. Mike began bringing expensive presents during each pickup, items that far exceeded what our modest budget could accommodate, and that seemed designed to highlight the financial disparities between our households. The children would return from their weekend visits with new video games, designer clothing, or electronic devices that created obvious disparities with their school friends and put pressure on me to match his extravagant gestures. The promises were even more damaging than the gifts, as Mike would mention plans for elaborate vacations, expensive activities, or major purchases that might happen if the children expressed sufficient enthusiasm for spending more time at his house. These carrots were dangled consistently but delivered sporadically, creating a pattern of raised expectations followed by disappointment that seemed designed to generate dissatisfaction with our more modest lifestyle and realistic approach to entertainment and rewards. Ryan, with his 6-year-old's direct approach to problem solving, began asking pointed questions about why we couldn't afford the things that Daddy could buy, and whether we might be happier living in a house with a pool and individual bedrooms. These conversations required careful navigation to maintain honesty about our financial circumstances while avoiding criticism of his father's tactics. I found myself walking a constant tightrope between acknowledging legitimate differences in our situations and protecting the children from being used as pawns in an adult conflict. Lily, more sensitive to emotional undercurrents, began displaying signs of stress that manifested in perfectionism about schoolwork and excessive worry about my feelings. She would ask repeatedly if I was sad about Daddy's new presents or if I felt bad that our apartment was smaller than his house. Her 8-year-old mind was processing complex family dynamics that no child should have to navigate, and I watched helplessly as her natural joy and spontaneity diminished under the weight of divided loyalties. The children's teachers at Lincoln Elementary began noticing changes in their behavior and academic performance that reflected the ongoing stress of their home situation. Ryan's normally cheerful disposition became more volatile, with playground conflicts and classroom outbursts that were completely uncharacteristic of his previous behavior. Lily's perfectionism intensified to unhealthy levels, with tears over minor mistakes and excessive anxiety about meeting teacher expectations. These behavioral changes prompted conferences with both children's teachers, who expressed concern about the impact of ongoing family stress on their emotional development. The school counselor suggested strategies for helping them process their feelings about divided living arrangements and conflicting loyalties, but the root cause of their distress continued to escalate despite our best efforts to provide stability and reassurance. Ms. Vasquez's continued involvement in our case proved invaluable during this difficult period, as her monitoring responsibilities allowed her to document Mike's pattern of deliberate disruption and emotional manipulation. Her reports to the court detailed specific incidents where his behavior violated the spirit, if not the letter, of Judge Morrison's custody order. Building a comprehensive record of his failure to prioritize the children's emotional well-being over his desire for revenge against me. The investigator's observations during this period revealed sophisticated psychological manipulation that extended beyond simple gift-giving and schedule disruptions. Mike had begun subtle campaigns to alienate the children from our support network, making disparaging comments about Sam Williams and other friends who had been instrumental in our stability. He questioned the children about these relationships, suggesting that my dependence on others indicated weakness or inadequacy as a parent. More insidiously, Mike began planting seeds of doubt about my honesty and reliability, telling the children stories about our marriage that portrayed me as unstable and vindictive. These narratives were carefully crafted to seem like concerned explanations rather than deliberate character assassination, but their cumulative effect was to undermine the children's trust in my judgment and emotional stability. The financial pressure continued as well, with Mike's attorney filing multiple motions for minor modifications to the custody order that required legal responses and court appearances. Each motion was ultimately unsuccessful, but the cumulative cost of defending against these frivolous challenges strained my budget and consumed emotional energy that should have been devoted to parenting and rebuilding our lives. Amanda Chen recognized these tactics as classic examples of litigation abuse designed to exhaust my resources and force me into submission through sheer attrition. She recommended documenting every incident of harassment and disruption while maintaining strict adherence to the custody order's requirements, building a comprehensive record that could support future sanctions against Mike's deliberately obstructive behavior. The turning point came during a particularly egregious incident in February, when Mike failed to return the children at the agreed-upon time on Sunday evening, claiming that Ryan had become ill and couldn't travel safely. When I arrived at his house to check on my son's condition, I discovered that he was perfectly healthy and playing video games in the living room while Mike and Kayla enjoyed wine on the patio. The children's confusion about this deception was evident, and Ryan asked pointed questions about why Daddy had told me he was sick when he felt fine. This incident represented a clear violation of the custody order and demonstrated Mike's willingness to lie directly to me and manipulate the children's understanding of truth and honesty. Ms. Vasquez documented the incident thoroughly, including interviews with both children about their father's explanation for the delayed return. This blatant contempt of court provided grounds for Amanda to file a motion for sanctions against Mike, requesting that the judge hold him accountable for his pattern of deliberate disruption and deception. The motion detailed months of documented harassment, from systematic tardiness to expensive gift manipulation to outright violation of custody schedules, painting a comprehensive picture of behavior designed to undermine the children's stability and emotional security. Judge Morrison's response to the sanctions motion was swift and decisive, reflecting her growing impatience with Mike's failure to comply with both the letter and spirit of her custody order. The court hearing that followed was dramatically different from our original custody proceedings, as Mike found himself on the defensive rather than pressing for changes to our arrangement. The judge's ruling included specific financial penalties for Mike's contempt of court, mandatory co-parenting counseling to address his disruptive behavior, and a stern warning that future violations would result in more severe sanctions, including potential modification of his visitation rights. Most importantly, the court ordered supervised visitation for a 3-month period, requiring Mike to demonstrate his ability to prioritize the children's emotional welfare over his personal grievances. The supervised visitation arrangement meant that Mike's time with Lily and Ryan would be monitored by a court-appointed professional who could document any attempts at manipulation or inappropriate behavior. This oversight provided immediate relief from the systematic harassment that had characterized our interactions for months, creating space for the children to rebuild their sense of security and trust in the consistency of our family routines. The children's response to this reprieve was immediate and dramatic, with both Lily and Ryan demonstrating renewed enthusiasm for school activities and home life within weeks of the supervision order. Ryan's behavioral outbursts ceased almost entirely, replaced by his natural curiosity and joy in daily adventures. Lily's perfectionist anxiety diminished as she regained confidence in her ability to navigate family relationships without constantly managing adult emotions and conflicts.
The court-ordered co-parenting counseling sessions provided additional insight into Mike's psychological approach to our custody arrangement and his fundamental misunderstanding of effective co-parenting principles. The counselor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, specialized in high-conflict divorce situations and was skilled at identifying manipulation tactics and helping parents develop healthier communication patterns. Dr. Martinez's initial assessment of our family dynamics confirmed Ms. Vasquez's observations about Mike's controlling behavior and his tendency to prioritize his own emotional needs over the children's welfare. The counselor documented specific examples of inappropriate communication patterns, including his use of the children as messengers, and his attempts to gather information about my personal life through interrogation disguised as casual conversation. The supervised visitation reports consistently noted Mike's difficulty accepting boundaries and his continued attempts to influence the children's perceptions of our custody arrangement. Even under professional observation, he made subtle comments designed to generate dissatisfaction with their current living situation and loyalty conflicts between their parents. These documented incidents provided additional evidence of his inability or unwillingness to prioritize the children's emotional health. During this period of court-mandated supervision, our household experienced a renaissance of peace and stability that reminded me why I had fought so hard to maintain our current arrangement. Evening homework sessions returned to collaborative learning experiences rather than tense negotiations influenced by external pressures. Weekend family activities regained their spontaneous joy as we explored Riverside's parks and museums, without the constant undercurrent of anxiety about upcoming custody exchanges. The children's academic performance improved dramatically as their stress levels decreased and their ability to focus on learning was restored. Both Lily and Ryan received recognition from their teachers for positive behavioral changes and renewed engagement with classroom activities. The school counselor noted significant improvement in their emotional regulation and peer relationships, attributing these changes to increased stability in their home environment. My own professional life benefited enormously from the reduction in custody-related stress and conflict. With fewer emergency meetings with attorneys and court appearances disrupting my work schedule, I was able to take on additional responsibilities at Pacific Marketing Solutions that led to a significant promotion and salary increase. The enhanced financial security this advancement provided allowed us to begin saving seriously for home ownership while improving our current quality of life. The promotion to Senior Marketing Coordinator came with increased autonomy and the opportunity to work from home 2 days per week, providing additional flexibility for managing the children's schedules and activities. This improved work-life balance felt like a luxury after months of juggling constant crises and unexpected demands on my time and attention. As spring arrived in Riverside and the supervised visitation period neared its conclusion, Dr. Martinez's final assessment recommended continued restrictions on Mike's ability to make unilateral changes to custody arrangements. While the supervision requirement would be lifted, the court maintained strict guidelines about communication protocols and prohibited any discussion of adult conflicts or legal proceedings in the children's presence. The financial penalties imposed on Mike for his contempt of court had been substantial enough to discourage future frivolous motions and harassment tactics. Amanda explained that his attorney had advised him that additional violations could result in significant legal fees and potential reduction of his visitation rights, creating strong incentives for improved behavior moving forward. Most significantly, Ms. Vasquez's comprehensive documentation of our family's journey through the custody process had created a detailed record that would inform any future legal proceedings. Her reports established clear patterns of behavior and demonstrated the children's consistent thriving in our current arrangement, providing strong precedent for maintaining stability if Mike attempted future modifications. By late spring, nearly a year after Bree's betrayal at our original custody hearing, our family had not only survived the systematic campaign of harassment and manipulation, but had emerged stronger and more unified than before. The children's resilience throughout this difficult period had demonstrated their fundamental security in our family bond and their ability to distinguish between authentic love and manipulative behavior. The relationship with my sister remained complicated and distant, though she had made several attempts to reconnect as news of Mike's court sanctions became known within our extended family. Her apologies felt sincere but incomplete, lacking full acknowledgement of how her financial dependence on Tyler had compromised her ability to support us when we most needed her loyalty and honesty. Sam Williams and other members of our chosen family had proven their reliability and commitment through months of consistent support during our most challenging period. These relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than biological obligation, had sustained us through difficulties and celebrated our victories with authentic joy and pride. The apartment that had once felt like a temporary refuge had evolved into a true home where each family member felt valued and secure. Our modest space had proven more than adequate for building the kind of family culture that prioritized emotional connection over material possessions, cooperation over competition, and authenticity over appearance. As we planned for our summer activities and looked toward the future with renewed confidence, I reflected on the lessons learned through this extended ordeal. The legal system, while imperfect and slow, had ultimately protected our family's interests and recognized the value of stability over disruption. Professional advocates like Ms. Vasquez and Amanda Chen had provided expertise and support that made justice possible despite Mike's superior financial resources. Most importantly, the children had learned valuable lessons about resilience, truth, and the importance of maintaining integrity under pressure. They had witnessed firsthand how persistent effort and honesty could overcome manipulation and deception, lessons that would serve them well throughout their lives as they encountered future challenges and conflicts. The transformation of our family from victims of systematic harassment to confident survivors of adversity felt complete as we approached the first anniversary of our legal victory. We had not only maintained our stability, but had built upon it to create opportunities and experiences that enriched our lives and strengthened our bonds with each other and our community. Looking ahead to the future, I felt optimistic about our ability to handle whatever challenges might arise, secure in the knowledge that we had faced the worst that family conflict and legal manipulation could offer, and had emerged victorious through persistence, honesty, and unwavering commitment to each other's welfare. Part 5: The False Dawn. The phone call from Amanda Chen came on a crisp December morning, her voice carrying an unusual brightness that immediately caught my attention. I was in the middle of preparing Lily's lunch for school, spreading peanut butter on whole wheat bread, while she practiced her clarinet in the living room, the familiar melody of hot cross buns echoing through our small apartment. Ryan was still getting dressed, taking his time as usual to match his socks perfectly, a ritual that had become oddly comforting in its predictability. Amanda's news was better than I had dared hope. Judge Morrison had issued her preliminary findings, and while the final order wouldn't be entered for another 2 weeks, the essential framework had been established. Mike's petition for 50-50 custody had been denied, and our current arrangement would remain largely intact with only minor adjustments to holiday scheduling. The relief that washed over me was so intense that I had to sit down at our small dining table, my legs suddenly unsteady beneath me. Ms. Vasquez's report had been the deciding factor, Amanda explained, and it contained observations that went far beyond what either legal team had anticipated. The family court investigator had documented patterns of behavior and communication that painted a detailed picture of both households and their respective impacts on Lily and Ryan's well-being. Her conclusions strongly favored maintaining the stability we had worked so hard to create in our modest apartment. The investigator had been particularly impressed with the children's academic performance and emotional stability under our current arrangement. Both Lily and Ryan had thrived during the evaluation period, with teachers reporting excellent classroom behavior and strong peer relationships. Their grades remained consistently high, and they demonstrated the kind of resilience and adaptability that spoke to their fundamental security in our family structure. Ms. Vasquez had also noted the quality of our daily routines, and the way the children participated naturally in household responsibilities without being asked. She observed how Lily helped Ryan with his homework without prompting, and how both children contributed to meal preparation and cleanup as part of their normal evening routine. These small details had apparently made a strong impression, demonstrating a level of family cooperation that couldn't be manufactured for a court evaluation. The contrast with Mike's household had been subtle but significant in the investigator's analysis. While his house offered more space and material amenities, Ms. Vasquez had observed a certain formality in the interactions between Mike, Kayla, and the children. The relationship seemed cordial but lacked the easy intimacy and natural communication patterns that characterized our apartment life. Amanda shared specific excerpts from the report that highlighted Ms. Vasquez's concerns about Mike's approach to co-parenting. The investigator had documented several instances where Mike had asked the children inappropriate questions about my personal life and work schedule, using them as sources of information rather than protecting them from adult conflicts. This pattern of behavior had raised red flags about his understanding of appropriate boundaries in divorce situations. The financial aspects of both households had been thoroughly examined, with Ms. Vasquez concluding that while Mike's superior earning capacity allowed for more expensive activities and gifts, financial resources alone didn't determine the quality of parenting or the stability of family relationships. She had noted that our modest budget was managed responsibly, and that the children's needs were met consistently without creating financial stress that might affect their emotional security. The investigator had been particularly thorough in documenting the children's actual preferences versus their coached responses to questions about living arrangements. Through careful questioning and observation, she had determined that while Lily and Ryan enjoyed certain aspects of their father's house, they were most comfortable and relaxed in our apartment environment. Their behavior was more natural and spontaneous in our home, suggesting a level of emotional safety that transcended material considerations. Ms. Vasquez had also investigated the circumstances surrounding Bree's absence from the custody hearing, which had initially seemed like such a devastating blow to our case. Her independent research had uncovered information that would prove crucial to understanding the complex dynamics at play in our
family situation. The investigator had discovered financial connections between Mike's construction business and Tyler's personal training venture that raised questions about potential conflicts of interest. Amanda explained that these financial relationships had created a situation where Bree's testimony might have been compromised by indirect pressure through her boyfriend's business interests. While this discovery didn't excuse my sister's failure to appear when we needed her support, it provided context for understanding the complex pressures that might have influenced her decision to avoid the courtroom. The judge's preliminary ruling specifically addressed the issue of witness availability and the importance of authentic testimony in custody determinations. Judge Morrison had noted that the absence of a potential witness could sometimes be as revealing as their presence, particularly when financial or personal pressures might compromise their ability to testify honestly. This observation suggested that the court understood the broader dynamics at play in our family conflict. The holiday schedule modifications included in the ruling were designed to provide more predictability and reduce potential sources of conflict between households. Rather than complex alternating arrangements that changed annually, the new schedule established consistent patterns that would allow both families to develop traditions and expectations around specific celebrations. This stability would benefit the children by reducing confusion and eliminating the need for annual negotiations about holiday plans. Amanda warned me that Mike's attorney would likely file an appeal, particularly regarding the investigator's findings about inappropriate questioning of the children and the financial pressure on potential witnesses. However, she felt confident that the appeal would be unsuccessful given the thoroughness of Ms. Vasquez's investigation and the strength of her documentation. The report was based on months of careful observation and interviews rather than partisan arguments or speculation. The financial implications of maintaining our current custody arrangement were immediately positive for our household budget. The stability meant no changes to child support calculations or my obligations, allowing me to continue building our emergency fund while maintaining our current standard of living. The stress of potential financial catastrophe that had haunted me throughout the legal process was finally beginning to ease. More importantly, the ruling validated my instincts about what was best for Lily and Ryan's emotional and developmental needs. Judge Morrison's recognition of our apartment as a loving, stable environment confirmed that effective parenting wasn't dependent on material wealth or impressive accommodations. The children's happiness and security in our modest home had been officially acknowledged and protected through the legal system. The timing of Amanda's call just before the children left for school allowed me to share the good news with them in a way that emphasized the positive aspects without dwelling on the legal complexities they couldn't fully understand. Lily's face lit up when I explained that we would continue living in our apartment, and Ryan's immediate question about whether this meant we could finally get a pet fish suggested that his concerns had been more practical than emotional. The drive to Lincoln Elementary that morning felt different, as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted from my shoulders. The familiar route through our neighborhood looked more welcoming, and the school building itself seemed less like a temporary arrangement and more like a permanent part of our community. The children's excited chatter about their upcoming Christmas concert and Ryan's soccer tournament reflected their own sense of relief about the stability of their daily routines. At work, I found myself able to concentrate on projects and deadlines in ways that had been impossible during the months of legal uncertainty. The creative energy that had been sapped by constant worry about custody arrangements began to return, and I threw myself into a holiday marketing campaign for one of our major clients with enthusiasm I hadn't felt in months. My colleagues noticed the change immediately, commenting on my improved mood and renewed focus on professional goals. Sarah Kim, my supervisor, had been quietly supportive throughout the custody evaluation process, offering flexible scheduling when court appointments conflicted with work responsibilities and never making me feel guilty about the occasional personal calls from attorneys or social workers. Her understanding of work-life balance had been crucial during the most stressful periods, and I made a point to thank her for the accommodations that had allowed me to maintain professional performance while navigating family legal issues. The lunch invitation from Sam Williams came that afternoon, her voice bubbling with excitement about the custody news she'd heard through our network of mutual friends. We met at Café Luna downtown, a cozy restaurant that had become our regular spot for celebrating milestones and processing difficult experiences. Sam's genuine happiness for our family's success felt like a warm embrace after months of uncertainty and stress. Over salads and coffee, we dissected the implications of Judge Morrison's ruling and what it meant for our family's future plans. Sam's own experience with custody disputes 3 years earlier had given her insights into the emotional toll of legal proceedings and the relief that comes with favorable resolutions. Her friendship had been one of the unexpected benefits of our move to Riverside, demonstrating how genuine support could emerge from shared experiences and mutual understanding. The afternoon pickup at Lincoln Elementary provided another opportunity to appreciate the stability that the custody ruling had preserved. Lily's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, mentioned how much she enjoyed having consistent communication with one primary parent and how well both children had adjusted to their current routine. Ryan's kindergarten teacher, Miss Taylor, noted his improved focus and enthusiasm for classroom activities, suggesting that the resolution of family uncertainty had positive effects on his academic engagement. The children's excited recounting of their school day felt more relaxed and natural than it had in months, as if they too sensed that a period of instability had come to an end. Lily's art project featuring our apartment building showed careful attention to details like the small balcony where we grew herbs and the window boxes with seasonal flowers. Ryan's story about helping his soccer teammate who had fallen during recess demonstrated the kind of empathy and confidence that flourished in secure environments. Our evening routine that night took on a celebratory quality as we prepared a special dinner together to mark the positive news about our custody arrangement. The children helped choose ingredients for homemade pizza, and we turned the cooking process into a collaborative adventure that filled our small kitchen with laughter and conversation. These moments of simple joy reminded me why I had fought so hard to preserve the life we had built together. The phone call from my parents came during dinner, their relief about the custody decision evident despite their careful neutrality throughout the legal process. They had worried about the potential disruption to the children's stability and were genuinely happy that our current arrangement would continue. Their offer to visit for Christmas felt more meaningful now that our family situation had achieved legal recognition and protection. Bree's text message arrived later that evening, a brief but sincere expression of congratulations that hinted at her own relief about the custody outcome. The message didn't address her absence from the hearing or the circumstances that had prevented her testimony, but it suggested an awareness that the family conflict was moving toward resolution. I wasn't ready for deeper conversation about our relationship, but the gesture felt like a tentative step toward eventual reconciliation. The children's bedtime routine that night included extra time for reading together, a luxury that felt possible now that the constant anxiety about potential changes to our living arrangements had been resolved. Lily chose a chapter book about a young artist who finds inspiration in everyday surroundings, while Ryan selected a picture book about a soccer-playing dinosaur that never failed to make him giggle. As I tucked them into their bunk beds, both children expressed satisfaction about continuing to live in our apartment and maintaining their current school and activity schedules. Their contentment with our modest circumstances, despite exposure to their father's more affluent lifestyle, demonstrated the success of our approach to building family happiness around relationships rather than material possessions. The quiet evening hours after the children fell asleep provided time for reflection on the journey that had brought us to this point of stability and security. The divorce 18 months earlier had felt like the end of everything familiar and safe, but the custody ruling represented validation that we had successfully rebuilt our lives around different but equally valuable priorities. The financial planning that had seemed so urgent during the legal proceedings could now focus on long-term goals rather than crisis management. The possibility of saving for a down payment on a small house within the next few years felt realistic rather than fantastical, and the children's college funds could resume regular contributions that had been suspended during the custody evaluation period. Most importantly, the ruling had confirmed that love, stability, and consistent parenting were more valuable than material advantages or impressive living spaces. Our small apartment had been officially recognized as a nurturing environment where 2 children could thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. The validation felt deeply personal and profoundly meaningful after months of having our family life scrutinized and evaluated. The week that followed brought a series of small confirmations that our lives were returning to normal rhythms. The children's teachers reported improved focus and participation in classroom activities. Their friends' parents mentioned how happy and well-adjusted Lily and Ryan seemed during playdates and social activities. These observations from neutral parties reinforced the court's findings about our family's stability and happiness. The holiday shopping that had seemed so stressful during the uncertainty of the custody evaluation now felt manageable and enjoyable. We could plan Christmas gifts and activities with confidence that our traditions would continue uninterrupted. The children's wish lists included modest items that reflected their understanding of our budget constraints and their appreciation for experiences over expensive possessions. The staff Christmas party at Pacific Marketing Solutions provided an opportunity to share good news with colleagues who had supported me through difficult months. Their genuine happiness about the custody resolution and their interest in our holiday plans demonstrated the workplace community that had sustained me during challenging times. The promotion opportunity that Sarah had mentioned earlier in the year seemed more realistic now that personal crises were no longer consuming my emotional and mental energy. As December progressed and the final court order was officially entered, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the legal system's ability to recognize and protect children's best interests despite the complexities of family conflict. Judge Morrison's thoughtful analysis and Ms. Vasquez's thorough investigation had ensured that decisions were based on evidence and observation rather than financial resources or legal maneuvering. The stability that we had fought to preserve was now legally protected and officially recognized. Our modest apartment remained our sanctuary, our daily routines continued to provide structure and security, and our family bonds had been strengthened rather than damaged by the challenges we had faced together. The future stretched ahead with possibilities for growth and achievement that had seemed impossible during the darkest days of legal uncertainty. The children's Christmas concert at Lincoln Elementary, scheduled for the following week, would be our first major family celebration since receiving the custody ruling. Their excitement about performing songs they had practiced for months reflected their renewed confidence in the stability of their world. These simple milestones and traditions had been preserved and protected, allowing our family story to continue developing without the constant threat of disruption. As I prepared for bed that night, listening to the peaceful sounds of my children sleeping safely in their shared bedroom, I realized that the false dawn I had experienced so many times during the custody process had finally given way to genuine daylight. The challenges ahead would be different but manageable, and the foundation we had built together was strong enough to support whatever dreams and goals we chose to pursue in the years to come. The first sign that something had shifted dramatically came during the next custody exchange, when Mike arrived at our apartment with an expression I had never seen before. Gone was the confident smirk that had characterized his demeanor throughout the legal proceedings, replaced by something that looked almost like defeat mixed with barely contained rage. He stood at our door holding a manila envelope, his jaw clenched so tightly that I could see the muscles working beneath his skin. Lily and Ryan sensed the tension immediately, their usual excitement about weekend visits with their father dampened by the uncomfortable energy radiating from his rigid posture. They gathered their overnight bags quietly, exchanging glances that spoke to their growing ability to read adult moods and navigate family conflict. The easy chatter that typically accompanied these transitions was replaced by an awkward silence that made even simple logistics feel fraught with unspoken hostility. Mike's words were clipped and formal as he handed me the envelope, explaining that his attorney had received additional documentation from the court that required my immediate attention. His refusal to make eye contact and the tremor in his voice suggested that whatever was contained in those papers represented a significant setback to his custody goals. The children climbed into his truck with subdued expressions, waving goodbye through the window as they drove away toward what promised to be a tense weekend. The contents of the envelope were even more shocking than Mike's behavior had suggested. Amanda Chen had forwarded a copy of Ms. Vasquez's supplemental report filed just days after Judge Morrison's initial ruling. The family court investigator had continued her investigation beyond the formal evaluation period, prompted by information that had come to light during her review of financial records and witness statements. What she had uncovered represented a complete vindication of my concerns about Mike's character and his fitness as a co-parent.
The supplemental report detailed a pattern of financial manipulation and witness intimidation that extended far beyond what I had suspected during our marriage, or the subsequent custody battle. Ms. Vasquez had discovered that Mike's apparent affluence was built on a foundation of questionable business practices and deliberate deception designed to create advantages in family court proceedings. His construction company had been involved in several disputes with subcontractors over unpaid bills, and his credit history revealed significant debt hidden through complex financial arrangements. Most damaging to his custody case was the revelation that Mike had systematically pressured members of my extended family to avoid testifying or providing support during the custody evaluation. The investigator had documented phone calls, financial transactions, and business relationships that created conflicts of interest for potential witnesses. Bree's absence from the custody hearing wasn't simply a matter of work priorities or family loyalty, it was the result of calculated pressure applied through her boyfriend's business interests. Tyler's personal training business had received a substantial loan from Mike's construction company just weeks before the custody hearing, creating a financial dependency that compromised Bree's ability to testify honestly about what she had witnessed during our marriage. The loan terms included clauses that gave Mike significant control over Tyler's business operations and the ability to call in the debt immediately, if certain conditions weren't met. This discovery explained my sister's sudden unavailability and her obvious discomfort when discussing the custody proceedings. Ms. Vasquez had also uncovered evidence that Mike had attempted to influence other potential witnesses through various forms of financial and social pressure. He had approached my former colleagues, neighbors, and even some of the children's teachers with leading questions designed to gather information that could be used against me in court. When these informal interrogations didn't yield the results he wanted, he had resorted to more direct forms of manipulation and intimidation. The investigator's report included detailed documentation of Mike's attempts to coach Lily and Ryan about their preferences regarding custody arrangements. Rather than allowing them to express their natural feelings about their living situations, he had repeatedly questioned them about specific aspects of our apartment life that he hoped would support his arguments for custody modification. The children had been asked to compare material aspects of both homes while being discouraged from discussing emotional or relational factors that might favor our current arrangement. These coaching sessions had been subtle but persistent, involving repeated conversations about the benefits of having individual bedrooms, access to a swimming pool, and the financial advantages of living with someone who could afford expensive activities and gifts. Mike had also planted seeds of doubt about my emotional stability and financial reliability, suggesting to the children that their life with me was somehow temporary or uncertain compared to the security he could provide. Ms. Vasquez had discovered this pattern of manipulation through careful interviews with the children and cross-referencing their statements with observations from teachers, family, friends, and other neutral parties. The investigator's training in child psychology had enabled her to distinguish between authentic preferences expressed by children and responses that reflected adult coaching or pressure. Her findings revealed that while Lily and Ryan enjoyed certain aspects of their father's house, their genuine comfort and emotional security remained centered in our apartment. The financial investigation had been particularly thorough, revealing discrepancies between Mike's claimed income and his actual financial situation. His construction business was heavily leveraged, with significant debts that could potentially affect his long-term ability to maintain his current lifestyle. The impressive house in Oakwood Heights was mortgaged to its full value, and his monthly expenses exceeded his reliable income by substantial margins. This financial instability called into question his claims about providing enhanced security and opportunities for the children. More troubling was the discovery that Mike had been using company funds for personal expenses, including legal fees related to the custody case and expensive gifts designed to influence the children's preferences. This misuse of business resources not only violated basic accounting principles but also suggested a pattern of deceptive financial practices that extended beyond his divorce proceedings. The investigator noted that such behavior raised serious questions about his honesty and reliability as a co-parent. The supplemental report also addressed the circumstances surrounding witness intimidation and the broader pattern of Mike's attempts to control the legal process through manipulation rather than honest presentation of facts. Ms. Vasquez had interviewed several people who had been approached by Mike or his representatives with requests for information about my personal life, work habits, and parenting practices. These informal investigations had been presented as casual inquiries from a concerned father, but their systematic nature revealed a deliberate campaign to gather ammunition for use in custody proceedings. The investigator had been particularly disturbed by Mike's willingness to involve the children in these information-gathering efforts, asking them detailed questions about my daily routines, work schedule, social relationships, and emotional state. This use of children as sources of intelligence about their other parent violated basic principles of healthy co-parenting and demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of children's emotional needs during divorce transitions. Judge Morrison's response to the supplemental report was swift and decisive, reflecting her growing concern about Mike's approach to custody arrangements and his willingness to prioritize his own interests over the children's welfare. The court issued an immediate order requiring Mike to cease all contact with potential witnesses in the case and prohibiting any discussion of custody matters with Lily and Ryan during his visitation periods. These restrictions were designed to protect the integrity of any future proceedings and shield the children from further manipulation. The judge also ordered a comprehensive review of Mike's financial records and business practices, conducted by a court-appointed accountant who would determine the accuracy of his income claims and the stability of his financial situation. This investigation would examine not only his construction company's records but also his personal finances and any business relationships that might create conflicts of interest in custody proceedings. Most significantly, Judge Morrison scheduled an emergency hearing to address the findings in Ms. Vasquez's supplemental report and determine whether Mike's behavior warranted sanctions or modifications to his visitation rights. The court's tone had shifted dramatically from the measured consideration that had characterized the original custody evaluation to obvious concern about deliberate manipulation of the legal process. Amanda Chen's analysis of these developments was both encouraging and sobering, as she explained the implications of the investigator's findings for our family's future. While the supplemental report strongly supported maintaining our current custody arrangement, it also revealed the extent of Mike's willingness to go to extraordinary lengths to achieve his goals. The pattern of manipulation and intimidation suggested that he might continue these tactics even after unfavorable court rulings, requiring ongoing vigilance and documentation. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the following week, giving both legal teams minimal time to prepare arguments about the appropriate response to Ms. Vasquez's findings. Amanda felt confident that the evidence was overwhelmingly in our favor, but she warned that Mike's attorney might attempt to discredit the investigator's methods or argue that his client's behavior, while inappropriate, didn't rise to the level requiring sanctions. The children returned from their weekend visit with Mike in subdued moods that reflected the tension they had experienced during their time at his house. Neither Lily nor Ryan volunteered information about their activities, and both seemed relieved to be back in the familiar comfort of our apartment. Their reluctance to discuss the visit suggested that Mike had been unable to hide his stress about the legal developments, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere that affected their enjoyment of time with their father. Lily's careful questions about whether we would need to go to court again revealed her awareness that the custody situation remained unsettled despite the positive ruling we had received earlier. Her 8-year-old mind was processing complex adult conflicts that no child should have to navigate, and I could see the strain of divided loyalties affecting her usual cheerful disposition. Ryan's increased clinginess and reluctance to leave my side when bedtime approached suggested that he too was picking up on the renewed tension surrounding custody arrangements. The week leading up to the emergency hearing brought a series of revelations as Amanda's investigation into Mike's financial practices uncovered additional evidence of questionable behavior. The court-appointed accountant's preliminary findings revealed significant discrepancies in his business records and confirmed that his construction company was in far more precarious financial condition than his custody arguments had suggested. These discoveries provided additional support for our position that Mike's apparent advantages in terms of housing and financial resources were largely illusory, built on unsustainable debt and potentially fraudulent business practices. The contrast between his public presentation of success and the reality of his financial situation demonstrated the kind of deceptive behavior that made him unsuitable for increased custody responsibilities. Most importantly, Ms. Vasquez's investigation had revealed the true extent of the pressure that had been applied to my family members and support network throughout the custody process. Understanding that Bree's absence had resulted from financial coercion rather than simple betrayal provided context for her behavior while still acknowledging the pain her abandonment had caused. The systematic nature of Mike's manipulation explained many of the isolation and uncertainty I had experienced during the most difficult periods of the custody battle. The emergency hearing promised to be a turning point that would either establish clear boundaries around Mike's behavior or escalate the conflict to new levels of intensity. Whatever the outcome, Ms. Vasquez's supplemental report had fundamentally changed the dynamics of our custody situation and exposed patterns of manipulation that could no longer be ignored or dismissed as normal divorce conflict. As I prepared for what might be the final courtroom confrontation with Mike, I felt a mixture of vindication and apprehension about the future. The truth about his character and methods had finally been revealed through professional investigation, but the consequences of that revelation remained uncertain. The game had indeed changed, but the final outcome would depend on Judge Morrison's willingness to hold Mike accountable for his systematic abuse of the legal process and manipulation of family relationships. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.